Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and I'd like to welcome you to my tutorial demo. This demo is associated with Chapter 6 of the Reggies in Step Java book. And in Chapter 6, we are going over file access. And here the demo that I've created is a class called CSVAdder. And this is for Chapter 6. So let's get ready, okay? I want to, usually when I'm putting solutions from more than one chapter in the same project, I use a package to keep them separated, okay? A package gives them their own namespace. So new package, and then I use something close to the scheme that I have been using, net.logent.students.chapter06. Okay? And as long as I'm here, I'll create one for Chapter 7, which is going to be pretty soon because we're doing them together. So new package, net.logent.students.chapter07. Okay. All right. So since this is a Chapter 6 related class, we're going to put this here. And so let's create a new class. And I'm going to call it CSVAdder. And CSV is all caps because it stands for three words. It's an acronym, comma, separated values, and then capital A for adder, lowercase d-d-e-r. Okay, and this is going to require a main because it's going to be testable all by itself. Okay, now CSVAdder is going to read a comma-separated values file. And so far we haven't been creating test files. We've had whatever test data is coming in from the console. And in Chapter 6, we learn how to associate a file in the file system with an object in our program. So we're going to take advantage of that here. So I'm going to create a text file. I'm going to have it go into this particular project. Now, I just happen to know from experience that if you want to access a file within your Java class and you want to do it in Eclipse, the place to put the file to get at it easily is to put it in the project, but not in any folder within the project. Okay, so I'm going to say I want a new, and let's call this an untitled text file for now. Okay? So here's my concept. I want a file with a bunch of lines of text. And in those lines of text, I want to have a series of integer values separated by commas. If there is no integer between commas, if there's nothing at all, or if there are just spaces, or if there is a text, for instance, I want us to skip over that. So I'd like this to be kind of robust. Okay, so here's the test data that I want to be able to process. The first line, and see what I want to do is I want to add these up line by line. So if I encounter one int, well then it'll just be that for the total. 2, they'll be added together. 3, they'll be added together. And while it's processing along, if it finds some non-integer entry, it's just going to skip it. So the first line just has one int. The second one has a 1, a comma, a space, and a 2. The next one, 1, comma, space 2, comma, space 3, comma, space 4. So you get the idea there. Okay, let's put some extra spaces in. So 1, a couple of spaces, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that looks good. If it can handle that, it's pretty robust. Let's start this next one off with a non-integer, just an alphabetic. And in honor of my late mother, I usually use the word mom. Okay. And then let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And then on the next one, let's say 1, comma, mom, comma, 2, comma, 3. And in the next one, let's just a couple of spaces, mom. Okay. And then on the very last one, let's do comma, 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 space, 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 1. Okay, so this is fairly dirty data, and it's also comma delimited data. These are also called comma delimited values. And this is a fairly frequent input format that I think we ought to learn how to use with a scanner. Okay, so I've got 8 lines of input right here. It looks pretty good. Okay, so why don't we save this? So I want to say file, and I want to save as, and now it's going to say, well, because that was an untitled file, I'm not really going to pay attention to where you said it was before. So I have to say, okay, I have to highlight my project. All right, now I don't want to call it untitled. I want to call it test case 1. Okay, .txt, because it's a text file. And let's say, okay. All right, now, if you're watching over here in the Package Explorer panel on the left, you'll see that in our project, not inside anything, but at the very end, we can see we have a test case1.txt file. And of course, if I come back here and I go down and I double click on it, you'll see that's the file that we have here. So that's what we're going to use for our test. Okay? Okay. So I'm going to put the main logic into main. And know in a lot of the things in our book, a lot of the exercises in our book, they want us to put them into a particular method. So in this case, I'm going to put the top level logic directly into main. Okay? And if I'm going to create a file object, I need to have the name of the file. And one of the things I find easy to do is just create a string variable called file name and give it the text that has the name of the file. So this would be test underscore case underscore 1.txt. All right. Now, the way that we're being taught to use files is with scanners, which is a pretty nice way to use a file. So let's do that. So let's have a scanner, call it file scanner, equals new scanner, okay, And now we have to create a file object for that test case.1 text file. And how do we do it? Well, we can just call the constructor for the file class, new file, a new instance of the file class. And what do we want to pass into the constructor to initialize this new file object? Well, one of the constructors takes a string, so we're just going to pass in plain old file name. All right, so let's look at the imports that we need. We need an import for scanner. That's in java.util. We need an input for file. That's in java.io. IO stands for input output. Okay, I thought we said we would take that, but apparently it didn't do it. Import java.io. All right, and now that we're using this file class, we have an error, and the error is most of the classes in java.io can have a lot of things go wrong when you're trying to use them, and so they do this thing called throwing an exception. That's how the code within a class signals that things have gone wrong. And it gives a couple of opportunities. One is it gives us eventually an opportunity to catch that exception and handle it. But I've got to say that in our code right now, and with our level of learning, we probably just want to please the compiler and say, yeah, I know that we can have a file not found exception, but I can't really handle it. So what do you do in that case? Well, you just have the method that you're in this case we're in the main, you have it declare that it throws that kind of exception. So add throws declaration. Okay, so this is what happens. Okay, anytime you have a statement that could throw an exception, you either have to go up to the header for the method that you're in and say, oh, by the way, code in the method can throw a file not found exception. Or in the alternative, you can put it inside of a try-catch block. Eventually, we're going to learn to do these inside of a try-catch block, but for right now, we're just going to pass on the exception. Okay? So we have that. Okay, that looks good. Okay, now I want to point out that we want to process our input file. And again, let's take a peek at the input file. A line at a time. So one of the techniques that we learned in chapter 6 is this idea of having a scanner that allows us to process the file a line at a time. We're going to use next line in order to do it. Okay. And we're going to get back a whole character string that has all the characters on that line. And then when we go to process within a line, we're going to use another feature that we learned in chapter 6, which is to create a scanner for that string. Okay, so the reason I called the scanner we created so far already a line scanner is this is the one that's going to get us our lines. Later on within this code, we're going to have what we call a line scanner, which is going to scan within the line. Okay, so we have a file scanner here. Okay, and let's have a while loop. Okay, so we're going to say while, okay, file scanner has next. What does that do? Well, that's going to be true if there's, has next line. Let's not do that. We're going to do a line at a time. So has next line right there. Okay. So while we have a line of input, we're going to do whatever work gets done within the loop. Well, I'll tell you what's really nice about the structure we have here. If we have an empty file, the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to open it up and we're going to go, oh, it doesn't have a next line, doesn't have any lines. Okay, we're just going to drop right through the while loop. We're not going to attempt to do any work unless we have a file that has at least a line in it. That's pretty nice. Okay, so now if it has a next line, we want to get it. So let's declare a string and call it line, and let's call the method next line on file scanner in order to get it. So we can say file scanner next line. Kind of guessed at what we want. All right, it's pretty good at guessing these days. Okay, so how do we know that's going to succeed? Well, we wouldn't have gotten here unless we had passed the test, because a while loop is a test before loop. So we just tested, does it have a next line? So we know we're going to get a next line. Okay. And then let's print whatever we get back from our worker method. So what I want to do is I want to take this line and I want to pass it to a method that I'm going to call add values. So what add values is going to do, it's going to find all of the legitimate int values on the line, and it's going to add them up, and it's going to give us the sum back. Okay. Well, what could we do here? Well, we could declare an int, call it sum of line equals, and then we could call add values, and we could pass a line. Okay, let's take a look at that. All right, so we have add values, which we're going to have to create. It returns an int, and it takes a parameter of a string. Well, one of the quick fixes is going to be to create that. Let's just create it. It created it for us. So it returns an int, and it takes a string. And it decided it was going to call it line. Okay, I always want to give it another name. Okay, so let's call it the line. Sorry, start with the lowercase, the line. Just so we know that we're passing a parameter. Okay? All right. So far what we have is we're set. Sorry, I made a little bit of an error there. So far we're set here. So it says we're going to return 0. Well, that's kind of interesting. But let's do the following thing. So we want to return the sum. So why don't we declare an int variable called sum and initialize it to 0. Okay. And then in the end, why don't we return sum? Return sum. All right, that looks good. Now, what we need to do is we need a loop that's going to loop over each of the tokens. You'll remember the scanner identifies tokens. It wants to loop over each of the tokens, and if they are ints, it wants to add them. Okay, that's good. So we need another kind of a scanner. Okay, we need something to scan a line rather than a file. So it's the same class can be used to scan a file object or a string object. So we're just going to use the scanner class. Okay. And I like to call this one line scanner because we're scanning a line equals new scanner. And what are we going to pass into the constructor? Well, we're going to pass in the line. We're going to pass in the string that we got passed. Okay. Now, an anonymous class cannot be a file. Okay. Oh, sorry. I don't know why I put that after that. There we go. We just wanted a semicolon there. That's it. It's not a method, it's not a class, it's not anything else. It's just a statement. Okay, that's fine. So now we have a scanner that we can use to go through all the tokens on this line. Now, up until now, the scanners that we have used spaces or white space characters to separate out the tokens. Okay? Now, sometimes you don't want to separate things like that, particularly if you have a comma-separated value file. Okay? If you remember, we are separating the values by a combination of commas and spaces. In some cases, let's put a couple extra spaces in here. Some cases it's spaces before the comma, and some cases it's spaces after the comma, but that. So how can we tell the scanner that it shouldn't be using just looking for just spaces to separate the tokens, but spaces and commas? Well, it turns out that every scanner object has a method called useDelimiter. Line scanner useDelimiter, and we get to pass it a string. And that string represents a pattern. And you'll remember that we've talked a little bit about regular expressions. Regular expressions are, well, it's a meta language for searching for strings. And it was, well, first introduced in Unix way back in the 1960s, and then has slowly moved into the rest of computing. So that there is a pretty well standard language of these regular expressions that you can use in order to look for a match on a character string. So we're kind of looking for a comma. Okay, so you go, well, maybe I'll just put a comma in and that'll be fine. Well, turns out it's a little more complex than that. Okay, and here's what we want to put in. We want to put in, if there's a meta character for a space, it's \s, lowercase s. So you remember that in Java strings, if you want to put in a backslash, you need 2 backslashes. So we have \, lowercase s, and then an asterisk to say as many times as needed, or as many times as you find. So start with as many spaces as you need, then have a comma, and then we're going to finish it with the same expression, \, lowercase s, asterisk. So this says I can have any number of spaces, including 0, a comma, and any number of spaces after that, including 0, separating the data. the tokens. So let's look at that. Well, so we've got 1 token on the first line, 2 tokens on the second, 4 on the third, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the sixth. So we've got, I think that this rule, if we understand regular expressions, okay, which we really haven't covered, so I'm just giving you a peek into regular expressions. That's going to do what we need. So now we've said to our scanner object, look, when you're trying to separate the tokens out on the line, use this regular expression to find the separators or the delimiters. Pretty neat, huh? Okay, so we're going to do this. So now we can use this just like a regular old scanner. So we're going to say while line scanner has next. Okay, why is that? Well, what if we have a line that doesn't have anything in it at all? In fact, let's add a line like that. Let's have a line right here between 4 and 5. Let's just put a blank line, okay? Well, it doesn't have any valid entries at all, okay? So let's make sure we can take care of that. Okay, so are there any tokens on this line at all? Okay, if there are no tokens on this line, well then we're just going to keep going, okay? If there is a token on the line, the question is, are we looking at an int or something else? If we're looking at an int, let's use it, okay? Let's add it to our sum. If we're not, let's blow it away. Okay, so let's say if line scanner has next int, sorry, I think I've got too many n's in scanner. Line scanner has next int, okay? Okay, if that's true, then we got to do something. All right. So what are we going to do? Well, we want to get the int and we want to add it to the sum. So we're going to say sum equals sum plus line scanner next int. Okay, read the next int. Is it possible to say that in a more succinct way? Yeah, there's a shorthand for this, and it's the plus equals. That way we don't have to say sum plus. Okay, so we're just going to say that. So that, we're only going to add it if it is an int. Else, we're going to blow it away. Okay, so we're going to say line scanner next. And this just eats up the next input, which we know is not an int because we tested it. And this will return the string of whatever it is, but we don't care what it is. So we let the return value just kind of drop off into the bit bucket ether. It's gone. Okay? All right. And we can return some. So we're pretty close to being ready to test here, except that we're not printing out the sum. Okay, so we're doing this while, right? but we're not printing it out. So let's print it out. Sysout sum of line. Okay, well that's fine. So now we're getting sum of line out. That's great. So problem with file scanner. Oh, now this is interesting because it says add suppress warnings to file scanner. Suppress warnings is cheating. Okay. We don't want to have warnings on our class. So let's go over and get over top of the error itself and see what it is. Resource leak. File scanner is never closed. Well, this isn't a real problem for our kind of batch kind of program that we have here, but if it doesn't like to have an unclosed file scanner object, let's close it. Okay, so let's, at the very end, before we finish up our work, let's say file scanner close. Okay. All right, that took care of that. Now we've got the same problem down here. So we don't want to suppress the warning. It says that it's never closed. Okay, so right before we return the sum, let's take this line scanner and close it. Okay, now these are more significant in web server programs, things that are going to stay open a long time. And if you accidentally leave code without closing something like a file or scanner or something like that, you can start to get into trouble with your resources. But here I think we're okay. Okay, so let's save it again. And again, test case 1 is the input. Let's look at test case 1. So what are we expecting? Well, 1, 3, 10, 15, 0, 10, 6, 0, 1. Okay, let's see if that's what we get. Let's save it and say run as Java application. And what did we get? Well, I think we're doing okay. 1, 3, 10. So let's look at the test cases. 1's fine. 3 is fine. 10's fine. 15's fine. Line 5, 0. That makes sense. The next one, 10, that makes sense. We didn't do anything with mom. The next one should be 6. Yep, didn't do anything with mom. The next one only has mom, that's a 0. And then the last one has a bunch of empty separators and a 1, and we got 1. So we got just what we expected. So we've done a couple things here. We've learned how to use the scanner to read comma separated values file. We've also learned how to deal with dirty data. Okay, now maybe you would want to do something a little more sophisticated here. Maybe if you found something in your file that you weren't able to add, perhaps you would display it on some kind of error file or something like that. But we're not up to that level of sophistication yet. The other thing that we've done is that we have, and let's look at a couple of these things. We have broken this up into 2 problems. Okay, we have, and this is a common pattern that they introduced in chapter 6, which is we ought to look at it on the top level as scanning a bunch of lines, whole line at a time. Okay, and then within each line on the second level, we want to scan each string that we get in as a line and look for the ints that are comma separated values. So we've done that. Okay, And I guess the only other thing that we've done here, well, the thing that I like is we have this pattern string that's pretty good for comma separated value files. There may be some rules of official comma separated value files that this doesn't encompass, but this is pretty good. These would encompass most of my comma separated value files. So we're okay there. And if we get something that doesn't fit, if we get let's just throw in one more. Let's throw in something that has a number with decimal places. So let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, comma 2. Okay, so we should reject the first one and get 2 for the last one. So let's give this a run again. And we got 2. So we got what we want. So we're throwing away doubles, we're throwing away strings, we're throwing away spaces, we're throwing away just when we have commas right up against each other. We're not trying to add things that can't be added. But the things that can be added, the ints, we're adding them up very well. So this is probably a superset of the skills that you'll need to do the Chapter 6 exercises that you've been assigned. They're not exactly like this one, but if you can understand this one, you ought to be able to do those. So I'll wish you luck and say bye until next time. Bye-bye.